Bom dia.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will ask you to kindly take your seats. We're going to start showing you the video of security safety norms of the venue where we are right now. And you heard it yesterday, right? Hello, visitor. We're happy to have you in our Museum of Tomorrow. In our lecture hall, you have equipment to ensure your safety. Be mindful of the passageways and hallways. They're important escape routes. Our exit doors are signaled, and there are anti-panic handles. And to activate them, all you have to do is push them. We have fire extinguishers. In cases of emergency, we have signaled exit routes and follow the fire brigade instructions. Smoking is not allowed inside the museum. You can take pictures and make videos, but during the event, it's important to remember that your cell phone should be muted so you won't disturb our program. The Museum of Tomorrow records its events in audio and images. When you participate, you allow the use of your image for dissemination purposes of our activities. The photographer of the Museum of Tomorrow is identified by wearing a badge and is the only person authorized to take official pictures. Drinks and beverages and food are not allowed inside the lecture hall. And when you leave, to take your trash with you. The Museum of Tomorrow thanks you for your presence and wishes you all a wonderful event. Thank you. A big welcome to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second day of our event. It's a pleasure to be here with you to open the second day of our International Security Conference, 4TD Copacabana, the largest security conference in Latin America geared to defense and security topics. This event has been organized by the Konrad Adenauer Foundation in Brazil through a partnership with the Brazilian Center for International Relations and the support of the European Union delegation to Brazil. This year, we also have support from the Institute of Development and Management, which is in charge of the management of the Museum of Tomorrow. It is a great honor to be here at this in this venue that tackles the issues of sustainability in the future that are tackled by the three organizing institutions. Yesterday we had an opening panel and two thematic panels on the topics of international organizations and global economy. Our opening panel today, as was said yesterday, is the backbone of the whole content of our conference, including bringing to our debate the issue of the role of Latin America and Europe in the face of the changing global order. And both of our thematic panels today will be tackling issues like artificial intelligence and systemic rivalries. A great deal of food for thought was shared with all of us yesterday in an important discussion on the need to ensure the democratization of the international system and also the common goal in Europe and in Latin America around the construction of an international order based on rules and not only on geopolitics revolving around power. Our third thematic panel today will bring us, one of the talks will be in German, so I tell you all that we have translation equipment, and so you will use it when our German colleague starts talking. Here on the back of the badge that you all have, there is a complete program with the conceptual note of the conference and bios for all our panelists and speakers. Our third panel, thematic panel, has a topic that's important, extremely important, that will give rise to a great deal of discussion: the global order under transformation, the changing global order in the artificial intelligence era, challenges and perspectives or prospects. This panel seeks to understand the complex challenges due to the to breakthroughs in artificial intelligence, especially on the strategic agenda of all states in the world. This panel will tackle the implications of artificial intelligence on the international security and sovereignty of nations. The goal here is to search for proposals so that this technology will be developed ethically and responsibly. To look deeper into these topics, I would like to invite on stage as a moderator the professor from the University of Brasilia and an expert in international security and national defense, Professor Antônio Jorge Ramalho. He's joining us right now on stage. And the speakers will be the Director of the National Authority of Data Protection, ANPD, Miriam Wimmer. The Parliament member of the Defense Committee of the Bundestag in Germany, Congresswoman Serap Güler. Also, we rely on the participation via video conference of the Counselor for Artificial Intelligence in the General Directorate of Communication, Content and Technology Networks of the European Commission, Mr. Juha Heikkilä. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, all. Can you hear me loud and clear? Good. That's good news already. As you can see, my voice is, I'm overcoming a cold, and I do apologize to start off by the low quality of my voice. I hope you can hear me. I'd like to start off by thanking the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, SABRI, and the representation of the European Union and Brazil for the invitation to participate in this session. As I would say, it's the most intriguing session. It's a very intriguing session, and we have highly qualified people that know in detail this subject. But I would like to thank the organizers for the generosity for allowing us to bring together this distinguished group of experts. Yesterday, we discussed a great deal of central topics that have put this perfect storm in perspective: geopolitical conflicts, reorganization of productive chains globally. And we haven't discussed deeply, only in passing, the questions of interdependence and the impact of the reorganization of production chains globally, which have partially led to this perfect storm. It's also important. The topic that brings us together today, we're talking about an infrastructure, cyber infrastructure, but leveraged by artificial intelligence. It has brought the world together, but it has created auspicious opportunities, but also fearful trends. And this fear has come for a reason. In the terminology of international security, we talk about the creation of a new theater of operations, a cyber theater of operations, which is highly influenced by the possibility of the employment of artificial intelligence. This theater of operations brings in the seas, the land masses of countries, and the air, also in the airspace, but also it organizes economies and societies, thus fostering possible reorganizations and potential reordering of the production structures, but also access to the global wealth and the use of those resources. We're rather scared because it's not clear how this new arrangement has been organized and whether it is sufficiently regulated and normatized and standardized. Also, the specter of artificial intelligence points to the possibility of artificial intelligence getting out of hand, not just getting out of the hand of human beings, placing individuals out of the loop, as we say in English, but also human beings losing control of artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence can program its own algorithms and make use of a huge reservoir of available data in the decision-making processes. In a certain way, artificial intelligence and the cyber structure that has has brought us together in the world in a global village, to use the terminology of the United Nations, materializes a transfer of power from national states to organizations, to even criminal organizations, and to individuals. Even all of us are able to have access to information on our gadgets and to get organized, to put pressure on governments. If we're missing also, we should have legislation, a consensus on the principles that should form the backbone. Perhaps we Brazilians and Europeans also have this consensus, South Americans and Europeans. But globally speaking, it is not clear whether this consensus indeed exists. Yesterday, we talked about strategic competition between China and the United States along the same line. It's the most evident face of this competition, technological competition. All of us remember Stephen Hawkins, Elon Musk, to mention two big stars. They talked about the need to control artificial intelligence because it can be the best world, but it can also bring us huge nightmares, if you will. So that's the backdrop to artificial intelligence and the cyber issues that have brought us together here today. Brazilians, 40 million Brazilians this week talked to artificial intelligence when they submitted their tax receipts. And we need when you complain of you complain about a banking service or a telecom service, you use artificial intelligence, and that is something present with us. It's not about the future; it's about the present. ChatGPT perhaps has brought to our attention the need to face this issue. Nobody needs to explain what it means, but theoretically, we don't yet have a concept, a sole concept of artificial intelligence. We're talking about algorithm systems that are able to program huge amounts of data very accurately and very quickly, even much more so than human beings. Normally, they're used to perform tasks that human beings don't want to perform anymore, or to help human beings. It's a tool. It's a human construct. Artificial intelligence will be whatever human beings decide that it should be. In this sense, it's not just a tool that extends our possibilities of operation, as I said before, due to the capacity of self-knowledge, of machines, machine learning. Actually, they themselves can develop their algorithms, and by so doing, they may advance in domains that have not been anticipated by human beings. If there's not a clear definition of the limits of this artificial intelligence and its development of the algorithms, they can learn to tell stories, for example, about human beings, and therefore they may condition human behavior that will change, or that will give rise to social processes, the consequences of which and implications of which will transform reality per se. Therefore, it is much more than simply creating music or pictures or paintings that we're impressed by the abilities of artificial intelligence to do things that human beings have excelled in even better than human beings. It's a lot more than just winning chess games or getting to know the rules of the game and overcome and beating human beings to it. It's much more than diagnosing illnesses in specific areas of medicine, for example, even better than doctors would be able to do. It's much more than identifying productive processes and monitoring complex production chains to know if the environmental regulation and labor laws and and fiscal legislation task legislation is being followed, or sanitary rules are being upheld by companies that want to export products to countries that require this kind of legislation. It's a lot more than precision agriculture or precision mining that allows us to explore spaces and commodities in a way that's a lot deeper and orderly, thereby avoiding deforestation, for example, and making the best use of resources without putting lives at risk. And these natural resources, it's a lot more than just sequencing genes and identifying possible vaccines. Like we learned, the speed with which mankind responded to the latest pandemic has a lot to do with the employment, with the positive use of artificial intelligence and in the creation of vaccines as a response to sanitary crises, but to identify possibilities of cure for ailments that affect human beings. Artificial intelligence is able to tell stories linked to human beings that is very dear to us. We saw those tools being used in recent elections in many countries, in order to potentialize and leverage certain versions of the world and the possible worlds.
And this can produce then very great imbalances internally to all the states. We have seen automation ending with some sectors increasing the creative acceleration of many people that are insurance brokers or accountants. They have to be concerned because they can be replaced by machines, and people that are going to be replaced by machines and robotization can be very unhappy and can be also a trap for extremistic and populist solutions that can be wrong for the society. But it was exactly artificial intelligence is able to imprison us and lead us by their own will based on the algorithms that they make up. In stories and new futures, as some futurists nowadays are talking about or fear that this can happen. How to build trust among the governments and societies in a world that can be out of control. That's what we're talking about. There is a light in the horizon that is called responsible AI. We have a lot of data for processing, but how to develop human talents that have an ethical approach, able to control this tool, and not to bring the Aladdin out of the lamp, like they say in Arabian countries. How to lead all this innovation, viewing the common well-being. What kind of institutions do we need to bring this, complying with ethical resources, legal ones, having safety and security for people and communities, having this cyber structure increased by AI can be a strength for the well-being in order to improve our capability to face this perfect storm and not a force at the service of the lack of stability, globally speaking. That's why we have a panel of experts, people that dedicate their life to talk about this. What has been said by the Ariane, to whom I thank the introduction. You have a very great curriculum and are experts in this panel. I invite, in the back of your badge, we can see the QR code, and you can find all the curriculum of the speakers. And I will pass directly the floor, opening this context and bringing information to the students of international relations that know about all the challenges. Miriam, that is Director of Brazilian Authority of Protection to Data, National Authority. And then we'll follow the order of the program, going then to Mrs. Serap Güler, that is member of the German Parliament, and to Dr. Heikkilä. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce correctly your name, that he is an AI consultant of the European Commission. All of them with a lot of views and understanding on AI. Miriam, I pass the floor to you. Good morning. Good, dear moderator, thank you very much for the introduction. I would like to start greeting my colleagues, the panel, all the public, and show my appreciation to Cas, Sebri, and the European Union in Brazil for the invitation to be part of this event. I would like to say that I'm very happy because for a long time, I work in law and technology, and the subject of international relations has always been present in my life, but I'm not an expert. With a lot of joy, I checked in the agenda of this event, focused in security, defense, and geopolitical relations, focus on technology, mainly on AI, that seems to me is part of this scenario of the perfect storm that we have talked about during these days. I would like then also to explain my position. I am a public servant for 17 years already in health, and my path came the Telecommunication National Agency by the Ministry of Communication, by the Science and Technology Ministry, and in these places I've been able to work and develop our policies towards AI as Brazilian strategy of AI, and also recently I have been member of the Jurist Commission of the Senate on the use of AI, in charge of proposing a bill of law to regulate this subject in Brazil. As Professor Antonio, I'm director of Brazilian Authority for Data Protection. As no one knows what this is, it's a special department, like a regulating agency, in charge to protect the data of people and the fundamental right that we have in our Constitution to protect data. I'm also a professor of law and technology at ANPD, but I don't mean that I'm talking about the name of all institutions specifically, but trying to find a perspective based on these different places that I have been in. And I'm very happy also with the invitation, because you have already given a great scenario explaining why it makes sense to discuss this subject in this kind of conference. I want to add to your words that we are in a never seen moment previously in the history, a process that some people call a digital transformation. We have an ecosystem of technologies like cloud computing, technology of things, big data, 5G, that allows a scenario that is an amount of data that are available, data that feed and are based or training for technology like AI. Technology that has incredible power, but also brings risks that have to be analyzed. And as you mentioned, Professor Antonio, AI is not something of the future. It's now, and I bet that 90% today have interacted with the system of AI, although they don't know it. And I think there are a lot of traits of this technology that have to have our concern. AI doesn't reason as we human beings. When you ask to chat GPT, they don't think about the answer. They react. It reacts based on information that it has received to train it. A database of training. These data that are available. And that's why it's a technology that in a way is always looking to the back mirror. It's based on a track record. And of course, that's the reason it brings results that are unfair, that continue some trends in our society, in our economy, in our politics. And that's one of the great issues of attention, is actually the risk of discrimination. It's a system that doesn't hire women, because historically women are not working because they have to work at homes. It's a system of social benefits that unfairly affects marginalized population, because it is based on the track record that these groups can be related intensely to frauds and so on. So this is a concern, and it has another trait that it's opaque. The difficult to give explanations why a specific result was reached, and many times the programmer cannot explain why they reached a certain result, because the machine can improve itself, and you lose all the link of why they reach a specific conclusion. So these are issues that are very important when we consider that AI is used not only in an automatic translation or ways or in apps that you comment something, but also to classify legal processes, to define who will be subject to specific inspection by public administration, to determine also if a specific autonomous weapon will be used towards a target that has been identified as military, but can it be civil also. Autonomous vehicle that can have an accident and will kill the driver of the car or run over someone. So it has very sensitive impacts in our reality, not being only a support for human decisions, but also replacing human decisions in critical areas, including areas that come to decisions of life or death. So that, in this sense, I believe that today's panel focuses on two approaches, domestic approach, but also international approach. These are issues that are interconnected because we're talking about digital economy that's essentially transnational, and also because the development of these technologies is not given in a uniform way among nations. You have to understand inequalities and imbalances in geopolitics to recognize that the position and interests of nations that lead the dispute for technology are different from those in countries of the South, global South, or capitalist ones, a position where Brazil, in a way, is found. And having said this, I want to talk a little bit about trends. I think that when we talk about this, we can talk about different moments. I followed this subject for a long time. I've been noticing the last 5-6 years, the first moment, there was the development of national strategies for AI, public policies towards stimulation, the development of technology, scientific technology, innovation, and also policies for capacity building of human resources and facing also the impacts in the labor market also, and also a discussion on regulation, legislation, ethical principles, very, very generalized and abstract. And this movement has another mirror, let's say, in organizations, multilateral, international, small civil societies that start to give statements of principles on the use of AI. And nowadays we have 20, 30 documents, international ones, that try to state principles for the use of AI. Professor Antonio talked about responsible use, but we have a lot of words that are used. AI, response, AI centered on the human being, AI for their well-being, besides other concepts that start appearing with a lot of strength, as like explanation, interpretation, intervention, or human review, centrality on the human beings, transparency. And I would highlight as an example of this movement the principle of OEDC on AI in 2019 that we also, and UNESCO document that talks about the ethical use of AI and brings a lot of comments. But these documents are very comprehensive. And how can we explain what something means in practice? So I think the recent moment is when we start to discuss this linking standards, legislation, and regulating bodies. And that's the moment where we find ourselves. And I want to talk a little bit very quickly about the European Union and Brazil. In the European Union, we have in final stages of discussion AI Act, a regulation that talks about AI. And here in Brazil, we have a discussion that's quite advanced in the Congress regarding the Bill of Law 21 approved in the Chamber of Representatives and now being debated in the Senate. And without going into details that are complex proposals, I would like to highlight some main aspects. I would say that a strong mention on the principles, but an effort to go beyond, to bring concrete parameters, more detail. And the second issue that has to do with the requirement to calibrate regulation according to the level of risk of some application. Of course, an autonomous weapon will have a risk quite different from an automatic translator. The level of risk will determine also the level of duties that are the developers of these technologies. And another approach to be considered is the complexity to regulate something in movement, because technology is always changing. 1 year ago, we were not talking about AI as ChatGPT, and exactly due to this, the requirement of thinking, regulating approaches that would not consider the classical pyramid of command and control, where the state commands and the private entities obey. So it's a technology that imposes regulating arrangements, more modern ones, that will combine regulating traditional mechanisms with self-regulated mechanisms, always based in an assessment of risk. And another last issue that I would also highlight is which is the arrangement of governance that we need. And this is a discussion domestically and also international. I would say that in Brazil, but also in the European Union, this is an open debate about who is going to regulate this. Cross technology with a lot of regulators that are already regulated, telecommunications, finance, and health. There's a requirement to have a government entity to interpret correctly legislation that is very, very complicated. Who's going to do this? Is the Protection Data Authority? It's a new authority. How are we going to ensure that our legal framework and managerial framework is at the level of this issue? And this is a challenge that I think is also for international concern, where we strongly work in the first moment in trying to reach a consensus on basic principles. So the following question is, and now? Which is the next step. So I would like to end the first comments. Professor Antonio, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm very anxious to hear the others and answer eventual questions. Thank you. Thank you very much, Miriam. So you have the floor. Thank you very much also for the opportunity of being here in this intelligent event, this conference that is so interesting. And I'm very happy that today we're here talking about this subject. I think that the defect of security policies in the past was that we used to talk very little about the influence of AI, and I'm not an expert in AI, scientifically or technologically speaking. I am politically involved. So the issue of the algorithms and what it means to be behind this technology, I will not be able to answer this. But, of course, we are concerned about the central issue on how AI will influence our life and what we will do with our lives. This is an issue that is being in first place, but of course, as policy, we have to understand this, mainly what Miriam has just mentioned, that is the regulation, legislation, standards, and I believe that I will detail this further on. I believe that all of us know about this. It is very clear for us that artificial intelligence will change entirely our life as it was up to date, in a positive or negative way. That's why we're talking about this, the risks and opportunities, advantages and disadvantages, benefits, challenges and perspectives. That is exactly what we have mentioned, including in the title of this panel. And when we talk about regulation, Miriam has just mentioned this, and Antonio also, we are talking about regulations in the expectation that we could ensure unique standards in the global order. And at the beginning, we noticed that this is a complete illusion. It's not going to be possible to find similar standards, because we have political different systems, like the summit of G7 that met recently they spoke about the subject of AI, and in the joint statement, they say that AI should be developed based on democratic values, and that's what they intend to do the research. And now I would like to provoke talking about democratic values also is also a subject that we have to assess in democracies, for example. But there are countries with subjects, even in democracies, we are not able to have a consensus in so many subjects, because why should we have a consensus in AI? And there's another issue also. I, like a German person, I have to talk about this only in the European Union. It's going to be very difficult to find unique standards for AI. And in Germany, all the issue of data protection is assessed in a very, very different way from other countries in Europe. So these examples should show not only how this works and how it's difficult to understand and how we can ensure joint standards. Perhaps we should talk about minimum standards, but I believe that the discussion is happening in many countries, United States, Latin America, and European Union. We talk about regulation, and these last days we are seeing an interesting development on this subject. We have Facebook that never wanted to talk about regulation, mainly the CEO of OpenAI. He's traveling in Europe, meeting with Macron, with Scholz, to talk about regulation, because even the enterprises are noticing that it's not worthwhile to use this without regulation. It's much better if the enterprises they can decide about regulation than only the governments doing this by themselves without the influence of the private sector. So here we have things that are changing. Miriam has just mentioned about the effects of AI in the labor world, and we have digital transformation, and we've spoken about this. AI is already something recent, but digital transformation, when we started this discussion some 10 years ago, we used to ask ourselves, are we going to need radiologists in the future? And today the issue is more important. Perhaps in the future, will we have journalists? Are we going to have composers and other things? So nowadays the art is already subject to AI.
Much more so than we thought possible when we began this discussion around this topic. The development was quick. ChatGPT has been mentioned. I saw statistics yesterday that kind of impressed me. I was impressed by the statistics. I was quite shocked, actually. And Facebook also. Facebook has, let's start off by Twitter. Twitter needed 2 years, two full years to get 1 million users. Facebook needed 10 months to get 1 million users, and Instagram took 75 days. And the ChatGPT needed 5 days. 5 days were enough to have 1 million users, and here we have noticed how these technologies are not only quickly disseminated quickly and get users so swiftly, but at the end of the day, what consequences that could have. That is, this discussion is really quite interesting as a whole, and I believe that I will sum up my views with a quote by Stephen Hawking. He says, artificial intelligence is possibly the best or the worst thing that could happen to mankind. And I think that sums up very well from the very beginning of our discussion, because if we politicians and experts and ordinary people, people with artificial intelligence knowledge or scientific knowledge. We've been working on this topic. I think all of us together must ensure that it won't be the worst thing ever created to mankind. Power relations, globally speaking, artificial intelligence will change a lot of things, and that will bring forth chances, opportunities and risks. I'm going to talk about opportunities. Decision-making processes will be facilitated. You were talking about that in your talk, in your spiel. I think that that's an opportunity, and we're going to see that in the labor markets. We needed judges, and in the future, that's an issue that 5 years ago nobody would ever have thought about, and that clearly shows that yes, indeed, it can facilitate decision-making processes. It's an opportunity, but also brings forth many risks involved in that. And what we need is to have a concrete assessment of where we are and what promises we need, so that we will have an international platform with rules and guidelines and frameworks so we can advance in that sense. Elon Musk has been mentioned. Elon Musk himself has talked about a moratorium. We're not talking about that at this point, but because we know that in Musk's case, it is not an altruistic wish. There is a vested interest, an industrial interest, a corporate interest behind it. But there are many experts that say that there are risks vis-a-vis artificial intelligence and its impacts on mankind, and these risks must be compared with, for example, the risk of a pandemic, global risks such as a nuclear war. So it's the same people that are saying that the situation, that's what it is, and that's an appeal. That's a call for action to understand what are the opportunities and risks involved. I think that the democratic discourse in the global world based on norms, that we heard about that yesterday, it's highly influenced, and it will be jeopardized in the absence of a definition of the possibility of patterns, of there being patterns and standards at the global level. The political systems, within political systems, we won't have the chance to reach the standardization of these rules and standards if we're not able to discuss the intricacies of these processes. It's important to be sensitive enough to understand, first of all, what are the possibilities that artificial intelligence has brought to us, and then we'll be able to understand how to regulate the risks. We've talked about technologies, we've talked about commercial issues, and we have seen that between Brazil and the European Union, there have been discussions around the work. So we will about thinking about the creation of instances in which we're able to discuss what artificial intelligence entails, what it is. Germany, Brazil, Argentina, it's very important for us to have this joint platform in these countries to advance further, and for us to, in fact, have more regulations in order to make breakthroughs and understand the positive aspects of artificial intelligence. We will be discussing further issues, but I'd like to bring three core issues to your attention. They're very important in this debate revolving around artificial intelligence. These three topics are of the utmost importance, and I'd like to bring them to your attention. Artificial intelligence may solve the biggest bottlenecks of mankind, but it can become one of the biggest bottlenecks of mankind. Perhaps a sentence that sums up this big issue is, and the debate around the regulation should be done. It must be taken seriously. The far west, the Wild West, when it comes to regulations and processes of digitalization, this Wild West is over. It's important so it's important we think about these issues. Let's think of, for example, the Meta company has suffered a great deal over the past few days. Meta had to pay over 1 billion euros in fines and penalties because of violations related to data and questions linked to this area. And you said that also, Mr. Anthony, in your moderation. How come a corporation is able to generate trust in its technology? How can it generate and navigate with confidence vis-a-vis other institutions in relation to what technology can do? Also, when it comes to regulations, it's important for all of us to not to make political decisions in isolation. We must embrace corporations and understand how they operate, because these are the agents that influence the advance of technology. Technological breakthroughs are within the scope of interest of corporations, and they have to sit around the same table as we do to jointly define regulations that will be able to generate technological responsibility and accountability. And thank you for the chance to talk to you. It's been a great opportunity. Thank you. Thank you so much. Great remarks. Actually, I'm going to give the floor now to Dr. Heikkilä. Thank you. Please correct me if I'm mispronouncing your name, sir. I do apologize if I murdered your name, but we have an expert here who will talk about linguistics, even the challenges that we've been facing. You have the floor, sir. It's so good to have you with us. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
No worries. Good morning to everyone. And first, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this prestigious conference. So it's a great pleasure and honor to be here and talk about AI in this context, on this panel at this juncture, which is very important and interesting, as has been pointed out already in previous comments. So in my opening statement, I shall focus mainly on, as was stated on the agenda, on the need to ensure sovereignty in the development of AI and on setting up a framework that allows technological innovation while also taking into account the ethical and moral aspects. And I will comment also on the international aspects of this, particularly from the perspective of the European Union, the European Commission, and how we approach this and what we do in this regard. Now, we published our AI strategy some 5 years ago in 2018. And from the very beginning of that Commission AI strategy, we have highlighted the need for a comprehensive approach to AI. What does it mean? It means that we think that it's essential to cover both technological and non-technological aspects of AI in our policy measures and in our investment agenda. So, on the one hand, we want to make sure that the European Union has the necessary research and industrial capacity in AI that is required to stay at the forefront of this technology. We consider that it's important that we have the expertise and the know-how to develop cutting-edge AI solutions. This is also, to some extent, a question of self-determination or sovereignty. For we want to be able to have control of some key aspects of AI technology and its development, rather than be dependent for crucial solutions on other players. So this is something where we feel that we need to ensure that the expertise and excellence is and stays in the European Union. And to support this, the European Union is building what we call an ecosystem of excellence. So this is done by investing in basic and applied research and development. But more recently, we have also started investing in deployment and capacity building. So we are, for example, also setting up testing and experimentation facilities. So those are facilities where AI solutions can be tested when they are being developed, so that research results can then be better translated into marketable products But not only that, so that we can also discover all the developers who use these testing and experimentation facilities in close to real life conditions. They can then discover any potential issues that the products they are developing, the solutions they are developing, their innovation, they might encounter then with any regulatory aspects. So these can also then be combined with regulatory sandboxes. So to sum up this side of our involvement, we want to invest in AI from the lab to the market. And these are the key elements of our AI excellence. We also put money behind our commitments. So through our research and innovation program, which is called Horizon Europe, and through our digital program, which is focused on deployment and capacity building, the European Union is investing 1 billion euros per year in AI in the current period, 7-year period running up to 2027. We have also talked to the member states of the European Union. We have drafted together the so-called coordinated plan, where we coordinate our efforts in this regard. And we wish to achieve, by the end of this decade, we wish to achieve a total investment volume of 20 billion euros per year. This includes public and private funding, and the public funding includes both the European Union funding and the European Union member states funding. So we feel it's very important to have the necessary volume behind it. Our public funding in the EU has actually a relatively high level compared to other regions and countries. The private funding, however, is still lagging behind, unfortunately. But we are trying to stimulate, invite the private sector to invest also, and to make sure that they shoulder their fair share of the burden, because we need to make sure that we have this excellence, and that requires also quite strong investment given how other regions of the world are investing in AI. Now, given all that, we do believe, however, that the benefits of the artificial intelligence, and I think it goes without saying that there are many benefits artificial intelligence can actually help us tackle many of the biggest societal challenges we have, and these were already mentioned early on by the moderator. So there are some clear, obvious benefits that could be gained from this technology and its use, but these benefits will only materialize if this technology gets deployed. So if it gets deployed and if it gets taken up by our society. But a prerequisite for this uptake is trust. Therefore, ultimately, the benefits also depend on trust and on whether this technology can be used safely and with confidence. And this is the reason why the European Commission has also considered it essential to address the ethical and legal aspects of AI. So this goes back to the very roots of our AI strategy. The non-technological aspects need to be addressed as well. So already in 2018, we set up a high-level expert group and tasked it with developing ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI. And most recently, of course, we have then published our proposal for a regulatory framework for AI, the AI Act. This AI Act is very strongly inspired by the work of the high-level expert group and its guidelines for trustworthy AI. And the AI Act is aimed at ensuring that AI can be used with trust and confidence in the European Union. On the other hand, the Act has been conceived in such a way that it is proportional and innovation friendly. It does not regulate AI as technology, but it regulates certain use of AI. So it takes a risk-based approach. This means that the AI Act only intervenes when the use of AI involves a high or unacceptable risk. In practice, this means that a small number of uses of AI are prohibited. These, such as general purpose social scoring or certain liminal manipulation causing harm, are considered to be incompatible with our values and our fundamental rights in the European Union. Therefore, they cannot be allowed in the European Union. Then high-risk uses are those uses of AI which require that the system undergoes a conformity assessment to show that it meets the requirements of the AI Act. So those are uses where AI is a safety component of products that are already regulated under sector-based legislation, such as machinery or medical devices. Or they can be AI systems in certain domains, such as employment or the operation of critical infrastructure. So these are the so-called, what we could call sensitive areas where the risk is high, so that we feel that there should be some guardrails in place. And that means that these systems, these high-risk systems, will have to undergo an ex-ante conformity assessment so that we know and we can be satisfied that they comply with the requirements of the AI Act. These requirements could concern a number of aspects, including the quality of data or transparency or human oversight, to mention but a few. So we have this twin objective of building an ecosystem of excellence and an ecosystem of trust in order to allow the technological innovation while addressing the risks and the negative effects of AI. We believe that it is possible to strike the right balance between innovation and protection. We also believe that it's a false dichotomy to claim that regulation stifles innovation. Indeed, we believe that good regulation can actually foster innovation. But we go beyond that. We are also engaged in international cooperation to foster the good governance of artificial intelligence. We are very happy, of course, to explain our approach to those who want to take inspiration from it. And we take note with great interest, note of the fact that Brazil's plan to regulate AI seems to be very congenial in its approach to ours. But going beyond that, the EU also engages bilaterally and multilaterally to support the setting up of global level playing field for trustworthy, human-centric and ethical use of AI, and to promote the good governance of AI globally. In other words, we are working with countries which believe that AI should be a force for good and should be used responsibly with appropriate guardrails in place. And we invite other countries to join us in this effort. So we are active bilaterally, but also multilaterally, for example, in G7, the OECD, and the Global Partnership on AI. So, but we also want to advocate at a more global level guardrails for generative AI. And there's a very good reason for this. As it was very well explained at the beginning, generative AI raises many grave risks and challenges, and generative AI can be a very powerful tool for disinformation or for other malign purposes in the hands of bad actors. Of course, we know AI risks from before. Of course, disinformation is not a question for AI, but it is the fast pace of development which is causing a lot of concern. And as was already pointed out, it is also causing concern among the practitioners in the AI field. There are increasing calls for regulation, for the regulation of AI in general, but perhaps more specifically also on generative AI. We got a lot of criticism early on when we published our proposal for regulation, AI regulation. I have noticed now in my contacts with our international partners that there is a rethinking going on. It would seem like the recent developments, the developments of the past 8 months or so have triggered off a reflection among those countries where it was previously considered to be unnecessary to go beyond anything other than guidelines or self-regulation. Whether that will lead to hard regulation remains to be seen, of course, but certainly there is a rethinking going on the basis of the contacts that I have and the exchanges I've had in my work on the international arena. And of course, the generative AI discussion has raised sensitivity to the fact that this is a matter of perhaps some urgency. So we have actually thought about this, and at the earlier this week, EU-US-TTC Trade and Technology Council ministerial meeting, it was actually discussed as a possible strand of work going forward. So working together to see how our bilateral cooperation in that context could support perhaps the G7 Hiroshima AI process. And of course, we would like to involve other countries, other like-minded countries who are mindful of the good governance of AI in this cooperation. We do think that such cooperation is even more important in an age where geopolitical tensions have increased and where the malicious use of AI is an even greater risk than it was before, or the power of the tools that can be deployed for malicious purposes has increased dramatically. Thank you very much indeed.
Como todos sabem, graças a
As you all know, thank you to the cyber infrastructure and AI. A lot of people are hearing this conference, and we have some questions that have been sent by people that are online. And I will select 2 questions that have been sent to the panelists. The first one from Mr. Guilherme Garcia says, beyond the regulation of responsible use of AI, which are the perspectives for the impact and use of AI in the short and long term in interstate activities, international organization, and the legal court, international court. This talks about the current experience in the failure negotiation on agreements regarding autonomous system of lethal weapons that haven't reached any consensus for a long time, above all because of the participation of China that defines this technology as strategic for this century, and of Russia also. Its president states that the one that has a domain on this technology will have a domain on the world. Simple as that. So for a security conference, I think we have to talk about the use of this technology for international relations from the geopolitical point of view. Mr. Mário Jorge talked about a second issue that mentions the following. With an advanced technology in central countries, is it possible to foresee that artificial intelligence is a factor of maintenance in the symmetry in peripheral and semi-peripheral countries in the global scenario? Do we have perspectives of changing this, or that means accelerating the distance among the countries, or can it contribute also? In what condition would it contribute to reduce this distance? I would add a second comment to the panelists, to whom I thank you very much. You have seen the complexity of the problem and the difficulties and challenges to produce a ethical regulation that would protect minimally the human rights from the point of view of its relation with the technology. So Serap mentioned the fact that the enterprises that are interested in the continuation of this market, they do wish their legislation. But this technology is also available for criminal organizations that are taking advantage to improve their capability of interfering in internal political processes, markets, and they bring a challenge, a very huge challenge to humanity in a certain way. And to the point that this consensus is so difficult to reach among democracies, it is worse in order to reach a global arrangement that will allow to consider, to struggle against, and in a harmonic way, the criminal transnational organization. How do you consider or see this challenge, and what paths should we follow, if not to face them, at least to take to political community the sense of urgency in this requirement and face this, that is a global problem, is a vulnerability shared by all, as well as global heating. We can follow the same order. Miriam, please. Thank you very much, Professor Antonio. Thank you very much to those who have asked the questions. And I would like, before answering, I would like to say that I'm not an expert in international relations. I think you would be better positioned than myself to answer some of the questions. I am just giving my tips. So in this spirit, accept my comments, please. I think the question of Guilherme and Mario, they have a strong connection. Guilherme asks on one side of the use of AI internationally, and also talking about the failure of lethal autonomous weapons use that shows a deep difference of perspective and positions among different countries here in the discussions. And this also was highlighted by the previous speaker when she mentioned about the difficulty of reaching an international consensus among G7 countries, because words like democratic values can have different meanings depending on the context that they're being used. In this sense, it seems that Guilherme's question and Mario's question connect themselves, because Mario questions if AI will be a factor of maintenance of symmetry between central countries and peripheral and semi-peripheral countries. And I would rather say yes. It's not for another reason that we have this true a race for the leadership of the development of this technology, and not for another reason that Russia, the president of Russia, stated this famous sentence that was mentioned today in other moments of discussion that we held. So I normally think, considering the usability is unavoidable to be used, the issue is up to what point and to what degree. And I believe this connects us with the third question, Professor Antonio, regarding the requirement of regulation of an urgency feeling. I think to regulate a technology in constant evolution is not so easy, not domestically nor internationally speaking. And I think that it seems that what is happening is exactly a slow pace, leaving some very vague statements in the direction to measures that have been more coherent, although they can be voluntarily given. And I think the third panelist has mentioned recent statement that the United States and European Union would be converging to a code of behavior towards AI, considering the voluntary participation by interested parties, and regarding while the legislation is not approved. So hybrid regulatory arrangements, I think, could be vague with intermediary tools, domestic tools, as though with a mix of regulation and self-regulation. That is a design that we've seen up to a certain point in the protection of personal data. Brazilian legislation, also in Europe, the protection of data. We talk a lot about not only behavior private codes that can be validated and recognized by state authorities, but also certification mechanisms by private entities that are inspected by the public power. So it seems to me that we have to think a little bit in arrangements that are not traditional ones, but consider technology that will bring challenges domestically or in the international arena. Thank you. I think another question was about the autonomous weapons. And about this, we could say, yes, regulations we do need regulations. We're not able to define autonomous weapon systems. We haven't reached a regulation yet. The example that was mentioned here was China. In fact, China, Russia, that have used the last meeting of the United Nations to talk about regulation on procedure, unique procedure in 2021. I think this was the time. And Russia, United States, and India in 2021 were not willing to regulate the autonomous weapons. So it's not only China that we can point our finger to. If we look at the definition towards China, autonomous weapons are those that could the use could be planned artificially and changed artificially. The European states have a different definition for this. So the issue here is not regulation, but the joint definition is being complicated. And if we consider the General Secretary continues thinking it's important, but he cannot convince all the member states. So this subject is so complicated as all the other areas that we have here in the issue of AI, and all this has to be reassessed politically speaking. Thank you, Círio.
So, thank you. I do not, let's say weapons control and weapons proliferation are not really part of the remit of my work, so I do not think I should pronounce on them. On the kind of more international, broader kind of control of AI and how to regulate AI, I think, as Miriam Wimmer pointed out, this is a genuinely difficult question. And I think already, as she also pointed out, and I fully agree, it's difficult enough even in a given jurisdiction, be it a single country or the European Union or some kind of a similar jurisdiction. The way we approach it, and that's also why we approach it the way we approach it, we try to be active on different fronts. So we try to be active bilaterally, and we try to be active multilaterally. And we think that a kind of a coalition of like-minded countries can also achieve a lot by setting an example, and by setting an example for the good governance of AI, and thereby perhaps have others join that coalition if it gains sufficient momentum. I don't think it can be realistic to assume that AI, like other tools, could be kept out of the reach of criminals or other bad actors. Of course, we have to try to mitigate the effects of that, try to prevent it as much as possible. But to completely exclude that would seem to be quite challenging. But from our perspective, the way to go about it is to try to have influence in different forums, be it G7, the OECD, UNESCO, etc., but also in bilateral discussions to have exchanges with our partners and to see where we can converge and how we can promote good governance together.
Thank you very much, Heikkilä.
We will still have about 10 minutes, so we can open also for questions from the audience. People have the mic here. We have one question, two questions, if someone else is willing, here in the back. Okay, 3 questions. I would ask only that people identify themselves and ask the brief question in order for us to have time to hear the speakers. Good morning, Érica Rezende, Superior College of War. Talking about security and development, and considering what could be the implications, above all, of a generalized impact on the use, mainly affecting the global south, because these new technologies, it has been mentioned that different jobs will disappear. So I would ask that if there is any mapping or a projection on the impact for the loss of labor, mainly for regions that are ready with problems of development. And thinking exactly in our public here that has graduated, many graduation students, because I think it's quite a dark scenario for the future. Okay, adding for the perfect storm. I think there's another person here with another question.
First of all, Good morning, all. I'd like to thank you for the excellent explanation about this topic. My question goes, it speaks about the question of employment, as has been mentioned before. Every time we see this issue of technological breakthroughs, and we could mention the first, second, and third revolutions, industrial revolutions, if I'm not mistaken. Some experts have drawn this comparison, and they talk about the fourth industrial revolution in terms of robotics and nanotechnologies. It's common to see many employment opportunities coming to being created, and many other job opportunities being wiped out. Many jobs surface and other jobs are eliminated, and that could increase inequalities within the same country, inside the same country, as well as among countries. People talk about the issue of states offering universal assistance in this case to provide support to these people who are not able to join the labor market, to enter the labor market. And that's just to wrap up my comment. If I'm not mistaken, Milton Friedman talked about a negative income tax, if you will. And in Brazil, if I'm not mistaken, Congressman Suplicy has talked about the question of subsidies and safety nets, social safety nets. Should countries engage in coordination towards universal safety nets for people who will be out of a job with few prospects for employability? Do you envisage a short to medium term solution? What's your name, sir? Gregory. My name is Gregory, and I will be graduating in international relations shortly. Thank you, Gregory. We have a young lady here on my left side. Hello, good morning. I'm Karen Maiola. I'm an international relations student as well. I'd like to ask you a question. What are the cooperation arrangements in the area of artificial intelligence to contain and struggle against organized crime? Some studies have said that NATO has been committed, and there's a question of Interpol as well. I'd like to know if there are other arrangements to face organized crime in the cyber world. We have one more tweet to our speakers. Thank you, Erica, Gregory, and Karen, for your questions. Eric and Gregory's questions are connected. What I have seen in this debate is that forecasts are not conclusive. At some points, people were saying that the professions that are under threat are those that require higher technical capacity, reasoning. Engineers, for example, would be at risk, but professions linked to creativity and manual labor would be better protected. But we have artificial intelligence that's able to paint paintings and create songs, and the comparison is not so adequate. Regardless of the scenario, the requirements of capacity building for the future are different from those that we had. I said we on our panel when we were 20 or 30 years ago when we were college students, university students, and that would require a deep rooted assessment of school curricula in order to endow our students with the new qualifications for the labor market in the future. As Gregory mentioned, many current professions will be wiped out. Truck drivers, Uber drivers, will they still be with us when we have autonomous cars and trucks? So lifelong learning and new skills must be present in capacity building programs and public policies towards designing proper curricula in order to avoid a catastrophic scenario when we're facing a paradigm shift. I don't know if it's viable to have universal social safety nets. What I heard in many debates is that Brazil is in a level of economic productivity that we would have to get better in order to prosper a lot more in order to consider a universal safety net. That's a question better left to economists. I don't know if there are specific cooperations in terms of artificial intelligence to fight organized crime, and many fora this topic has surfaced, even for that are not geared specifically to technology, but they're concerned about this theme because not just artificial intelligence, but new technologies in general have changed prosecution and the criminal and the illegal struggle against organized crime. I don't know if there is specific cooperation in that field. Thank you. Yes, thank you. I will start off by giving you an example, a personal example. When I finished university, I joined the hospitality industry. And in the meantime, there are hotels that work with nobody in the lobby, for example. When I finish my university studies, for example, my graduation will be, I'm 42 years old, I'm not that old, but in fact, the labor world has suffered enormous transformations. I finished school in 1994. So it's a scenario that's completely different from what I used to see when I graduated 29 years ago. It's not just the global south that is at a crossroads, digital crossroads, that will suffer like other regions in the world. In Uganda, for example, in other countries, we see the same situation, but we also see that there's a young population in these countries, and they understand technology a great deal about technology. They're connected to the new technologies. I'd like to draw a comparison with a place where I studied in Cologne. I think my colleagues were not so linked to technology, that they were not so keen on technology like many people in the global south. The question is, in the global south, they have fewer opportunities for formal education. It's important to grant people the avenues towards formal education, and that must be carefully taken into account and must be the focus of public policies, and there must be investments in that sense, in that direction. In Germany, the question of how assistance development aid should be linked to the question of research and development in the global south, so that people will have also access to technological development through formal education. As I said before, we have 16 federal states in Germany. I will talk about what Miriam just said. We have 16 state instances of control, data control, and the exchange of data within Germany is not so easy. Therefore, we see here an example of the question of the challenges that we're facing when it comes to data exchanges. And since this is the last round, I'd like to make one quick comment. You talked about automatic weapons. I think that artificial intelligence, will have to be looked upon through the lens of responsibility and accountability. I don't know how it'll be 20 years down the road, but right now I think that artificial intelligence should not be able to make decisions on life and death. We must not allow that to happen, because that needs to be in the hands of human beings. That must be left to the discretion of human beings. I'm happy to live in a country where these ethical issues are well taken care of and duly considered. So these automated weapons systems should not be left to arbitrary and discretionary decisions by algorithms. That they must be anchored in our value system. There is an intergenerational complexity here. These two ladies have left university not that long ago, and they see that their jobs are at risk. Let alone people who have graduated even earlier. I'll left the final comment to our colleague that's online with us. Please, sir, go ahead and make your final remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Muito.
In the interest, I'll keep it very short, but also because I don't really have so much to add to what the previous speakers said. The employment question is indeed very thorny, difficult. It is something that, for very understandable reasons, causes a lot of concern. We simply don't know what are the net effects of the changes. Before the rise of generative AI, I've seen a number of studies that the predictions diverge quite a bit. And it's hard to say. Others talk about big net loss. Others talk about net gains of jobs. But so the consensus is not clear. The jury is out. And that was before the rise of generative AI. I think one thing is, two things are certain. Some jobs will be lost, others will be created. Then where the net effect is, that remains to be seen. We don't know. Obviously, as has happened in previous similar developments, it's not going to be the same people who lose their jobs who are going to gain the new jobs. And that's why we need, as Miriam said, we will be needing reskilling and upskilling. So the skilling aspect is very important, and therefore this cannot be neglected. This has to be combined with other measures that are taken. As regards then the other economic questions, I leave those to economists and politicians to decide, because that's more in their remit. Thank you very much.
Eu queria agradecer muitíssimo aos panelistas que...
I'd like to thank the panelists whose accuracy and objectivity and wealth of comments have allowed us to make sure that this panel would merit a round of applause from all of us in the audience. Thank you so much for your brilliant comments. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Ramalho. A big thank you to all the speakers for yet another excellent panel, and to everyone in the audience and the virtual audience that we have, where we have an assessment survey at the end of the conference. It's very important for you to fill it out, so the 4-day conference will continue to be a joint effort, bringing together academic circles and civil society. The topics of this edition also took into account what you have written in the survey forums. You will find the survey questionnaire on your QR code, and through the confirmation of the survey forms. If it's fully printed, we will submit to you after the institutional closure of the conference. Will issue participation certificates. It's valid for you that are present here today with us, as well as the virtual audience. The issuance of certificates will take place in the foyer of the museum and the lobby of the museum, where you got the kits. So please help us fill out the questionnaire. And the survey is very important for us to keep building better editions of our conference. We will now have a 15-minute coffee break. We'll be back here very shortly. 15 minutes, please. Thank you.